And we're live.
All right. Hello. Welcome to the Human Rights Commission meeting. My name is Angelo. I am the chair of the commission. I am from Ward 2, and my pronouns are he and him. And so let's start with introductions. Just introduce yourself and then pass it on to the next person. All right, Mike, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Mike Waters, Commissioner and resident of Ward 7, and my pronouns are they and them. And I will pass it to Kathy.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kathy. I'm a resident of South Salem and a member of the Human Rights Commission. My pronouns are she and her. I will pass it to Krista.
Hi, I'm Krista Gallagher. I'm vice chair and I'm from Ward 4 and she and her. And I'll give it to Tricio.
Tricarico. Hi. My pronouns are they, them, and I'm from Ward 2. And I will pass it to Kelsey.
Carico. My name is Kelsey Murray. I use she, her pronouns, and I am a commissioner from Ward 1. I will pass it on to Debbie.
Hi, I'm Debbie Aguilar. I'm a lieutenant with Salem Police. I'm the liaison between the police department and the Human Rights Commission, and I use she, her pronouns. And Jake Logan.
Hi, I'm Jake Logan. I'm one of the students at Western Oregon University's Organizational Leadership Program, and I'll be one of the presenters. I will also be passing this off to Marianne.
Hi, I'm Marianne Bradshaw. I am the professor of the Western Oregon class presenting, and I'm so happy to be here tonight and see all of you and students coming on. Thanks. I use she, her pronouns. I live in South Salem in Ward 2. And let's just go through the students. Jake's already gone, but if we just go in order of presenting, Jeremy, Cody, Jen, and then Joey's also here.
Thank you, Marianne. Hi, everyone. I'm Jeremy, he, him, his, and I'm a student, as she mentioned, and I'll pass it over to Jen.
Thanks, Jen. Hi, good evening, Jen Party, and I go by the pronoun she, her.
Hi, my name is Cody Warner. I'm with the Organizational Leadership Master's Program, he, him, his, and I'll be presenting.
Joey, if you can say hi, you can unmute, but Joey Parnell's also with our class.
Yes, thank you, Joey Parnell.
Great. Mike, do you want to help us out? I'm looking for who hasn't gone yet.
I think aside from our interpreters, Amelia, did you get a chance to go?
Thanks, Mike.
No, my name's Amelia Knight. I'm a resident of South Salem. And my pronouns are she, her.
And then I think it's just our city manager liaison today. If you could introduce yourself.
Sure. Yeah, I just realized that's not my name, huh? Hi, everyone. I'm filling in for Gretchen Bennett tonight. My name is Lori Shaw Caceres. I use the pronouns she, her. I'm the youth development coordinator at the city of Salem. So it's a pleasure to be here tonight.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Lori, do you have any public comments tonight?
We reported nothing for tonight.
Right, thank you. And then looks like we don't have quorum, correct?
That's correct. I think I only have 6, if I have that right. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, unless Abigail, Bella, Oni, David, or Nathan or Drew. No, okay. So no quorum.
All right. All right, so we can, looks like we can move on to the action and our discussion items. And that is the student survey report. Mike, do you want to do an introduction?
I was looking through documents on my computer and couldn't find the unmute button. Really excited to have the class from Western Oregon here today. They worked in collaboration with our awareness task force to revise and redo the survey that we did back in I think we did the survey back in early 2020, pre-pandemic 2020. This go around, we made a few changes to the survey, and just really excited to hear their report of what they found out. And also just big kudos to the students, because we had a significantly higher response rate this time, and just really wonderful to have that level of information. I also just noticed that Linnell has popped in. Hi, Linnell.
Hi, how are you?
Not to put you on the spot, but we already did introductions, and I wondered if you could do your introduction really quickly before the students are just about to start presenting.
Awesome. So my name is Linnell Wilcox, and I'm the program manager for Safe Sleep United, which is a low barrier women's shelter in Salem. We're open every night of the week. And I was also honored to be able to work with the students and Mary Ann to help make the survey happen on the streets. And that was wonderful. Thank you.
Thanks, Linnell. Students, I think you can take it away.
Cody, are you a co-host? The idea is to share the screen in the side by side, but if we get into it and it's not working, we'll switch over.
Currently, the meeting is allowing any participant to share screen, so they should be able to share at their leisure.
Excellent, thank you.
Let's go back to the beginning.
Let's go
Can you guys see
way
it?
back.
Yeah.
Way back to the beginning.
Oh, sorry about that. You guys can see it, right?
Yeah,
Yep.
we can see it.
Perfect.
Like a sneak peek that way.
All right, I think I'm all ready.
Good. Thank you, Cody.
Hmm.
And thank you and good evening. We are OL 607, a class within Western Oregon University's Masters in Organizational Leadership program. And along with our amazing fearless leader, Mary Ann Bradshaw, our class had the pleasure and honor of partnering again with the HRC to more closely examine discrimination in Salem. Next slide, please. Oop, go back one if you would be so kind. If you'd like to follow along on your personal device, please type this URL into your web browser, bit.ly/WOUTOHRC. Next slide, please. Through our survey, we attempted to measure respondents' lived experience of discrimination in Salem, respondents witnessing discrimination of others or hearing about discrimination secondhand, how respondents rate Salem in terms of the frequency and severity of discrimination, and respondents' awareness of the Human Rights Commission. In terms of our methodology, we implemented an approach utilizing both online surveys as well as in-person surveys. The surveys were collected for about 2 weeks, and most of the in-person surveys were collected by part of our class speaking directly with those experiencing homelessness on a recent Saturday afternoon. I'd like to take a moment now to sincerely thank Linnell, who's on the Zoom today, for all her passion and dedication to helping us interview those experiencing homelessness. And then I'd also like to take a moment to thank HRC member Kathy, also on the Zoom, for joining the class on that Saturday. So thank you very much. Related to the in-person surveys that were collected, 835 respondents, one moment here, completed the survey. And it's important to note that while 25% of those 835 completed surveys were those experiencing homelessness, that does not necessarily represent the actual percentage of Salem's population that are experiencing homelessness, which is much lower than 25%. And finally, we inquired as to how respondents had heard about the survey in the first place. And the top 3 answers in order of most common to third most common were the City of Salem Facebook page, website, or email. another organization or group posted about it or emailed about it. And third, I was given a paper survey. So before I hand it off to the next presenter, are there any questions at this point? All right, then fire away, Cody.
I'll take it from you. I'm going to talk a little bit about the demographics of the respondents of the survey. This is useful in helping understanding the key findings later in the presentation. As you can see, we had a wide age range of respondents. People the ages of 30 to 49 were about 43% of all surveys completed. 63% of the respondents were female, which was the largest majority of overall respondents, whereas 34% were male and 3% were non-binary or self-described.
Okay.
This is interesting because the U.S. Census data said that Salem is around 50.2% male and 48.2% female. So this means that we had a much higher representation of females to males present in the results. Another interesting tidbit was if you look at only the hard copy surveys that were distributed, respondents were 46% female and 50% male, so it was flipped back around again. When looking at this slide, you can see 66% of respondents to the survey were white, whereas 25% indicated themselves as BIPOC race or ethnicity. In the 2010 US Census, the data indicated that Salem was 81% white. 23% of all respondents identified as a member of the LGBTQIA+ community. A small note was that people who identified with that community were lowest among the paper copy respondents. People who are experiencing homelessness is highly represented within our survey because as Jeremy said, the 200 of the 835 are around 24 to 25% of the surveys were hard copies that we passed out or Linnell and everyone went around and did all that work for. Around 2,695 people experience homelessness in Marion and Polk counties. This is around 0.5% of the population within those counties. Another interesting fact is that 20% of respondents had experienced homelessness in the past but don't anymore. 35% of respondents indicated that they have some kind of disability. The CDC actually reported that 26% of all Americans have some type of disability, so the number's a little bit higher in Salem. But of note that 72% of the hard copy survey respondents indicated that they have a disability of some kind, whereas in the other categories, as you can see, they were around 20 to 25%. That's about all I have before I pass it off to the next person. Is there any questions? All right.
Hi there, this is Jake Logan again. So more than half of the respondents, regardless of how they found out about the survey, have both either personally experienced discrimination or had heard or witnessed discrimination in Salem. Those who completed the paper survey almost all have personally experienced discrimination and witnessed heard about discrimination. All the other groups, so those who completed the survey online reported a higher number of witnessed or heard discriminations than those who had personally experienced discriminations. Next slide. Key findings with those who have experienced discrimination firsthand, so they were the ones who were being discriminated against. In their personal experience with the discrimination, over half the respondents reported the incident had occurred in the past 3 months. And the most common grounds for discrimination were, at number 1 was housing status, number 2 was race, and the third highest reason for discrimination was gender. Next slide. The majority of respondents indicated that they had witnessed or heard about discrimination in Salem. 75% of those instances have occurred within Salem within the past 3 months, while the rest of the majority, about 11%, occurred somewhere 3 to 6 months ago. In regards to the cause for discrimination, housing status dominates among paper copy respondents, while race dominates among online respondents. Next slide. We went and asked our respondents to give a rating of Salem. We calculated an average rating for various subgroups by assigning the following values to response options. Excellent would be a numeral rating of 5, 4 would be a rating of good, 3 would be average, poor would be 2, and failing would be a rating of 1. The online respondents gave Salem an average rating between poor and average, while the paper copy respondents gave Salem an average rating of between failing and poor. Because the question is worded differently than last year's question, which used a 5-point scale with grades, so A, B, C, or D, or F, it is difficult to compare, but the average in 2020 was 2.68 grade, with the most comparable to the City of Salem Facebook or web group. So those respondents who found their survey through the City of Salem's Facebook or web page in 2021 at a 2.73. Next slide. Oh, one more up. There we go. So this is to go over the general overall rating of Salem. So the total rating for online and paper respondents was a 2.27, while those who completed the survey online gave a higher grade of a 2.49. Those who did paper, so those who facing homelessness, gave it a failing grade at a 1.6 overall. Next slide. Some additional key findings, those in age groups 18 to 29 and 70 plus, as well as those who identified as Native Hawaiian Pacific Islander, or those who identified as veterans, were more likely to give Salem a higher grade, with the veteran population being the highest grading average of a rating of about 3.03. Those with disabilities, those who are currently homeless, or those who identified as non-binary or have chosen to self-describe their gender, were more likely to give Salem a failing grade. Those who were homeless or currently homeless gave an overall grade of a 1.63, those with disabilities of a 1.91, and those as non-binary / self-describe as a 1.89. We can also see that males were more likely to give Salem a slightly higher rating than those who are females, while again, those who gender identities outside the male-female were more likely to give Salem a failing grade. And with that, is there any questions before I hand off to the next presenter? No, I will hand it over to Jen Purdy.
Thanks, Jake. Good evening. So in keeping on with the key findings, one of the things we looked at, we had 2 questions of the 835 respondents. There were 2 questions that we formatted as open-ended, meaning they could free type and they could put anything in there that they wanted. One of them was specifically tied to the rating that a person gave Salem, and it was worded, explain why you rated Salem the way you did. And then the other was just the very last question on the survey, which was kind of a catch-all that just said, is there anything else you'd like to tell us? And so of those 2 questions, there were a total of 500 comments that were received combined. And so we took the time to go through and read each one of the comments and just try to get a sense in reading through them of what the prevailing themes were. And then we actually went through and started coding them based on words that we saw that occurred frequently. And so you can see the breakdown here of some of those results. And starting with hate groups, specifically white supremacists, Proud Boys, being the highest at 17%, followed closely by discrimination against the homeless population, and then negative comments regarding city leadership, law enforcement, and then need for education all came in at 12%. And so we'll look at some of these in a little bit more detail on the next couple of slides. So next slide, please. So as I mentioned on the last slide, in terms of hate groups, there were 17% of the respondents provided comments that they based their grade on the fact that they had specific concerns related to hate groups and white supremacy, and then, or they had some description that alluded to the same. And so you can see here just a couple of those examples. White supremacy, overt and covert, is extremely prevalent in Salem. The area is very conservative. Or we have Proud Boys problem. I think many come from out of town to bully and intimidate people who don't look or think like they do. The next one that I wanted to highlight had to do with city leadership and law enforcement. And as I mentioned, each of those categories had a 12% rating of, or 12% of the respondents had pointed to those two categories in a negative way. And in some of the narrative, individuals reported having witnessed multiple incidents during either city council meetings or through their direct work experience with city leaders. Many people said they felt as though their city leaders are simply dismissing and minimizing the very concerns of Salem citizens. And so you can see here, one of the quotes was, they have a big concern about police and those in leadership, especially the school board, new to Oregon and shocked at its history of discrimination. While another wrote, the Salem police treats rallies and protests with people of color differently than other protests. And so I did want to make a comment to say that, not every single comment was negative. There were some positive comments, although they represented less than 5% of the overall comments. But I did feel like it was important to point out that there were several comments. One such as, I lived in Salem for most of my life and I've never personally experienced discrimination. And I've personally not experienced discrimination, nor have I observed it such in my work or personal interactions. And I am personally committed to showing respect for all people. So next slide. So now we'll transition to awareness of HRC, and if you just point to a couple of things here on this slide. This tells us about the awareness of HRC based on how respondents found the survey. And so as you can see, 50 to 60% of online respondents had awareness. Well, first of all, 50 to 60% of the online respondents had awareness, while only 12% of the paper copy respondents did. But you can see from the graph that the two avenues where individuals had the highest percentage of awareness was those that were found through the City of Salem Facebook page or the category of other, which would seem somewhat logical since that's been a repeat mode of dissemination of this survey. Next slide. So as we understand, part of the task force charter is to increase awareness of HRC. And so this shows a representation going back to the very first survey that was done in 2017, and then the one in 2020 as compared to the one in 2021. One of the things that we wanted to point out is that it's really difficult to really cleanly compare, because the sampling plans differed from each of the years from 2017 up to this current year. And so in 2017, the survey was distributed predominantly through various human rights organizations. In 2020, it was posted to the City of Salem Facebook page and website. And then, as we've already discussed this year, and thus the huge increase in our respondents, we used many other methods of distribution this year beyond Facebook and some known groups. So that said, we think that the best comparison is to look at the 2020 survey results as it compares to the Facebook respondents of this year in 2021. And you can see that there's been some progress made, going from 51% last year up to 62% this year. Next slide, please. So in our final look at the awareness of HRC, I know there's a lot to look at on this slide, so I'll try and point you into what you want to look at. So these are broken down by the different subgroups that we had, and they're color coded. And so I'll draw your attention to the red grouping. And the red grouping is age 70 and over, who had the highest awareness of HRC. And then if you go just below that to the orange grouping, you'll see that 67% who are non-binary or self-described had the next highest. In terms of the lowest awareness, again, if you look down toward the bottom in the light blue, you'll see that those who are currently homeless, just at 10%, followed by the disability, which is the dark blue just below that, 34%. Next slide. So on the final results breakdown, we wanted to look at what the respondents thought would be the most beneficial services that HRC could provide. And so this graph is breaking down the responses, and it's breaking out because we had such a large amount of paper surveys, we thought it would be best to break them out to give you a better representation. And so this question allowed respondents to select any and all of the services that they were offered on the survey and that they thought might be useful. And so of the respondents who are currently experiencing homelessness, you can see here that 62% see value in receiving information about possible solutions, which is clearly a standout finding. In the aggregate, the service that really scored the highest in the aggregate, the service that scored the highest throughout each gender is information about all possible solutions as well. So we consider this data to be encouraging for HRC because it does indicate that there's a desire and a need for services that the HRC does provide. You can see that in the second highest ranked service is community organizations. So the HRC can definitely utilize this knowledge and really focus efforts on organizing community events and activities. And of the listed services, support groups consistently scored the lowest across all genders, which we thought would also be useful for you to know, because that might help you, allocate time toward other efforts as opposed to looking at support groups. And so before I turn it back to Jeremy to bring us home, does anybody have any questions for me? Okay, thank you.
I think we need the first, there we go. Thank you. And thank you, Jen.
Jeremy,
Yes.
can someone talk about the key findings around housing status? Do you mind doing that? If you go back one slide.
I could take a stab at it, sure.
Or I can.
Go ahead, I'll defer to you.
Sure. So this is Marianne. One of our key findings is that of all the subgroups, and we've shown you data charts with all kinds of rainbow colors and sliced and diced the data in a lot of directions, but we do have quite a bit of data, thanks again to Linnell and community advocates and the efforts to collect surveys from people experiencing homelessness. And as we look across the data set, this group stands out. They have the highest level of personally experiencing discrimination at 94%, as well as the highest level of any group that has witnessed or heard about discrimination, also 94%. We asked a question in the survey, how long ago was this most recent incident? And the most recent option we gave them was 3 months or less. And as we were going through coding the hard copy surveys, there were multiple where somebody wrote in like daily. Someone actually wrote on one of them, "Are you kidding? Every day." And there was feedback as we were talking to people, but then just written on the surveys that they completed that made it clear that it wasn't just once a quarter that they were experiencing discrimination, but in our city, it's a regular daily for many of them experience. Those experiencing homelessness also gave Salem the lowest rating for the level of discrimination and also had the lowest awareness of HRC. So as we look across the data set, we did want to have a finding shining a spotlight here on this need, that this is one of the subgroups that stands out as experiencing high levels and regular discrimination. And now I'll turn it back to Jeremy for conclusions.
Thank you. So to recap, here are some takeaways. Sadly, about half of all respondents had directly experienced discrimination directed at them, and around half of those incidents occurred within the last 3 months, and it involved discrimination based on housing status, gender, and race. So clearly, this is a very relevant, timely issue that has not dissipated much since the last survey about a year ago. The same can be said for secondhand discrimination, which is observing discrimination against others or hearing of discrimination against others. Again, most respondents had secondhand experience with discrimination. Most incidents were within the last 3 months and most commonly involved housing status and race. Next slide, please. We also asked respondents to rate Salem on a scale of 1 for failing to 5 for excellent in terms of the frequency and severity of discrimination. And 1/3 of all respondents indicated that Salem is failing in these categories. The average rating fell between average and poor. So clearly much work is left to do. And those experiencing homelessness in Salem rated the city with the lowest average score and also had the lowest awareness of the HRC. On a more positive note, compared to last year's survey, awareness of the HRC has increased about 10% over those who took the survey last year through the City of Salem's Facebook or website. So some recommendations to consider for the future. For future organizational leadership classes and future surveys, ensuring that those experiencing homelessness are included and brainstorm ways to expand survey distribution to ensure that the survey data set includes more diversity and inclusion of Salem's population. It would also be informative and advantageous to include more questions that ask respondents to either offer their own solutions and ideas to help alleviate discrimination in Salem, or ask respondents to rate existing solutions or ideas. I will say, however, that many of the open-ended answers included ideas and solutions about how to alleviate discrimination in Salem, and I believe those will be provided to you. For the HRC, next slide, thank you. For the HRC, keep up fighting the good fight. The data clearly shows that discrimination is occurring in Salem at an alarmingly frequent rate. So you are important and very much needed. Continue advising the city as they overcome negative public perception and honor and value DEI principles. Continue utilizing the important platform of social media to build community and generate more awareness of the HRC. And lastly, develop an inclusive plan that addresses discrimination directed towards those experiencing homelessness. So thank you again for your time and partnership. And I'll open up the floor again for any questions or comments you may have at this time.
I'd like to suggest as we discuss that we stop sharing the screen so we can see each other better. Thank you.
Hi, thank you all for doing this survey. I so appreciate, oh, this is Kelsey, by the way. I appreciate y'all doing this work. Do you have any data focusing on like intersections of identity? So the difference of experiences and discrimination that white LGBTQ plus folks experience versus queer BIPOC individuals. Is that something that you can speak of, or do you have that data kind of ready to go?
Jake, this is exactly the question you were asking in class. Do you want to comment on it, or would you like me to?
I I had asked a similar question in class because I know that when someone who's in the LGBTQIA plus community and then you add BIPOC or another intersection, it increases their rate of discrimination. I also had brought up how many people are LGBTQ plus and are homeless. And if we opened it up to a younger age demographic, how much that would explode, because we know on average, a majority of homeless youth tend to be LGBTQIA because of discrimination within their family. So I think that might be a recommendation to add upon and add more to for future years to really get that intersectionality. Because we know when you add all those layers, it becomes like an onion, and the more you have, the more you have to keep digging.
I'll chime in. The data is ready to cut in 1,000 directions. And we did start looking, we showed that big rainbow chart. And if you say, okay, I'm going to look at age, but then the 18 to 29 group actually is over 50% said I identify as LGBTQIA plus as a member of that community. And our 70 plus, that's much lower and actually predominantly white. So we started to look at all these groups and the makeup of them and weren't totally sure how to represent that and what would be most useful and actionable to you. So I will offer that we can slice and dice the data. We can give you the data set. But if there's specific follow-ups that you say, hey, can we look at it in this way or take this lens and cut it like that? Yes, and we're willing to do follow-ups. So Kelsey, are there specific things that we could just go in and slice the data and bring it to you as a follow-up?
Yeah, I think, thank you for asking that. Similar to like what Jake was saying, I would love to see the intersections between homelessness and race and ethnicity, homelessness and gender identity, sexual orientation, and disability. I think those would be really great intersections to be able to lay out, especially if we are at further pushing for no or low barrier shelters. So that would be really awesome to have that data. Thank you all so much.
Great. Yeah, we'll get that to you. I will comment in the slides, we did look at disability and the respondents who are currently experiencing homelessness indicated yes for disability at a much higher rate than average, 72% versus the 20 to 25%. And in terms of LGBTQI, off the top of my head, the online, specifically the City of Salem Facebook website group had a much higher representation, much more yeses in terms of LGBTQIA than the other groups. And the currently experiencing homelessness was the lowest there. But we will slice that data and Mike, we'll just funnel things to you and if you can get things to folks. Great.
And actually funnel to Gretchen.
To Gretchen, even better. Okay.
Yeah.
I get
And
Gretchen.
Krista has a comment.
Wonderful, Krista.
And we're switching interpreters at the same time.
Okay. Yeah, I just want to make sure the interpreter could see me. Thank you so much for all your work. I'm really amazed and excited that you gathered all this information. And I do have a question. One of the slides showed the percentage of different communities who participated in the survey, but it went so fast, I missed some of the information. So I was wondering, which community did you feel had the biggest gap in information? Or that needed to find more information from?
The slides did go pretty fast. Hopefully we will get those all out to you so you will have a chance to revisit them. I want to make sure I'm understanding your question, Krista, because you're asking about a bunch of different communities and what those like rainbow charts with all the different subgroups were showing is of the people who completed the survey, what percentage of them were aware of HRC and what was the average rating. So when we look at gaps, are you asking about gaps like who didn't do the survey that like who was underrepresented in the survey? Is that your question?
Yeah, thank you for asking. I'm wondering of the people that you reached out to, the part that where we need to do more, maybe more outreach, like maybe the Black community or African American,
or Asian.
Or Asian.
Yeah. Cody, you talked about the slides on the demographics. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, I was actually trying to find the slide right now as we were just looking at it. Oh, I think I just found it. Yeah. So yeah, when I would just kind of like go over the slide again too for the respondents, it was pretty low. We obviously had, it showed that we had 12% Hispanic, Latinx, or Spanish origin, and 6% Black or African American, and 5% prefer not to say was the next highest. So perhaps we need to find more areas that people of those identities come to be able to distribute the survey. We were kind of talking about that a little bit more with the businesses within Salem that we can distribute the survey to. So maybe trying to find more businesses that represent those groups of people could be a better way to distribute the survey and get it out to those kinds of people too. Does that kind of go in the right direction?
Yes, this is Krista. Yeah, I'm just wondering how to approach the different communities. I mean, it's difficult to get representation. So I think that this is great. And for the future, just hoping to involve more, and I know in the deaf community, I mean, we need more of that too. So thank you. Thank you so much for your work.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Kind of along similar lines of Krista's question, I was wondering if there was any improvement in the percentage of Spanish speaking respondents. That was a gap that we noticed last year. It sounds like just from the data that we didn't seem to have a high percentage of Hispanic, but what about those who took the Spanish speaking survey? Do you know roughly how many?
I think we had 14 who used
Wow.
the Spanish speaking survey, and last year it was only 2. So an increase. And this year we did have 12% who indicated Hispanic, Latinx, or of Spanish origin. And I mean, it was a much bigger total number than we had last year. And we did reach out to CAUSA and Mano a Mano and the Salem Kaiser Equity. I'm not remembering the exact name, but we made a specific effort because we felt last year that we did not have enough representation from those of that Hispanic and Latinx ethnicity. And so it was one of the things that we strove for. And I know also you guys had mentioned that the city of Salem now has a Facebook page in Spanish. And so we had the invitation translated and posted it there. So I do think that it's a step in the right direction. I would still say that we ought to do more in future years. I still think that the Hispanic voice was underrepresented.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, even seeing any increase is positive, but kind of continuing to track toward having a more representative sample. And you noted in your presentation a number of places where our sample could be more representative of the population, and that's just one area. So wow, I was blown away by that presentation, I have to say. And particularly since I know Linnell is on the call today, what a gift it is to us to be able to see how people experiencing or unsheltered folks experience the city so much differently from the rest of the population, and the effort that you all put out on that was just extraordinary. So thank you so much, and thank you to Linnell as well.
This is Kathy. I just want to say thank you to Marianne and the students. You did a great job on the presentation. Going from that one Saturday afternoon that I was with you to over 800 responses is just amazing. And I think the data is going to take me a while to go through and kind of digest it, but I think we've got some really good information moving forward. So thank you and great job.
We were glad you came with us that day. Thank you. Yeah, so when we went out together, we collected 18 surveys that Saturday afternoon. Linnell and her group of community advocates got 209 paper copy. And then the total,
Wow.
we did, I think it was over 900 people that started the survey, but some people only answered a question or two. So to really analyze the data, we needed people to get far enough along that they gave us some useful information. So the majority of the analysis is on that 835 that finished. And if they skipped one or two along the way, that was fine, but they had to at least get most of the way through. So 209 of them were the paper copy. And Kathy, you could appreciate, that afternoon we were together, we got 18. So Linnell, you and your team to get to 209 worked really hard. Way to go. Thank you.
Wow. Yeah.
I have a question. Did the Human Rights Commission have the opportunity to read the student essays? Was that something that was shared?
No.
I would
So-
highly recommend that, and it's not just because they were beautifully written. To me, it kind of like all of the data is amazing, and I think it gives a whole lot of insights. But last year was the first year that I did the surveys in person, and it was mind-blowing to me how visceral some of this discrimination was, and how, like, as you're asking people questions, discrimination is happening right as you're doing it. And that's one thing to like think, oh yeah, people who are unsheltered or homeless are experiencing a lot of discrimination. It's very different to actually be on the street and experience it secondhand right as you're doing the surveys. The idea that, last year, so many people were kind of getting shelter downtown and under canopies by the mall and Rite Aid, and the discrimination was just cars revving, honking, screaming, get a job, throwing things right as we're doing the survey. And it was sometimes so loud that I could barely think. And this is how people are living, where it's happening every day. And there was one moment that was really ironic. I was talking to a white man who was not homeless, and I asked him the question about the rating of Salem, and he's like, Salem is great. They have no discrimination, as cars are driving by screaming at the homeless people to get a job. So there's like just this, sometimes there's a disconnect about even what is discrimination, even though you guys described it and defined it beautifully and simply. Some people just don't even think that what is happening to the people who are homeless even counts as discrimination. And then, some of the comments that I know you guys can't give samples of everything, but last year to this year, just getting some of the comments from people. People at Wallace Marine Park, Wallace, there's people who go out there in cars and have loudspeakers and go out there at night and go honking through the park, screaming at homeless people, doing donuts so that they can't sleep. We've had reports of sheltered people who will beat up homeless people. We've had reports of sheltered people who have raped some of the ladies. And I've heard that person-to-person crimes are more likely to happen from sheltered people to homeless people as opposed to the reverse. But the common perception is that the homeless individuals are the scary, dangerous ones. And in person-to-person crimes against each other, that's true. But in person-to-person crimes between sheltered and unsheltered, the sheltered people are more likely to commit crimes against homeless people than the other way around. And when we're hearing what's happening at some of the parks and the fear that's happening where you can't report that, how do you report that? And then one of the other inputs we had was when we asked what could change. The community, like support groups and counseling, that's not going to be a realistic option for people who are homeless. And the comments that I got commonly were like, I don't have time to figure out how to get to another place. Just where am I going to sleep and where am I going to eat? And their big thing was information about how to change it, was educate, show people that we're just people too. So their biggest input was, please educate people, not so that I can deal with being discriminated against, but so that I don't have to be discriminated against anymore.
Thanks, Linnell, for that great input. And I have a list of things that we'll share with Gretchen. And I hadn't put the student essays kind of about their experiences on that list, but they've given me permission to share them. Several of those students are on. So I will include, after we went out and talked to people and had them complete the surveys and help them complete the surveys, the students did a write-up about their experiences. So I'll include those. I'll just send Gretchen probably like a Google Drive, and she can share the pieces or share the whole drive, and you guys can read the pieces that are most interesting to you.
I would highly recommend reading all of it, you guys. It was beautiful to see that even just on one day, people could have their own perceptions change so drastically just in one day. And I think it's a testament to how much education can make a difference.
You know, we've talked for a couple of years on the commission about our current Chapter 97 does not list housing status as a protected status within our city. And we have long talked about how to take action to support our unsheltered community. And I think that this survey really gives us the information that we need to really tactfully and with lots of data behind us advocate for a change that's really important for our unsheltered community. So I hope that you all know, sometimes progress takes time on these types of commissions. A city commission of citizens, we meet once a month, and we have a couple of volunteer things that we do in between, and it takes us a while to get things in front of city council, and then you have to get city council to agree to your ideas and that sort of thing, and it takes some time. So you might not see this action and activity happen as quickly as any of us would want, but I want you to know that the survey is really, really important, and it's going to be used. We will make sure it is used. And thank you again so much for giving us this opportunity.
Angela here, and before I say anything, Lori, you had your hand up. You wanted to say something?
Yes, thank you. Commissioners, I don't know protocol on if a guest host can ask a question. Is that okay to do? Yeah, okay, thanks. Thank you all for this presentation of all nights for me to be able to host. This is extremely useful information for me as well, as I serve the entire community's young people. And young people for me really is about the age of 11, 12 to now about 24, 25, though I tend to highlight in high school. My question to you is actually our transitionally aged youth age range of about 18 to 24, 18 to 25 that you have in your data set. I would love a deep dive on just that section, both for sheltered and unsheltered. I think my partners in the community that serve the unsheltered population would love to see the responses from this as we work in many different directions related to better serving that particular population. But also I'd like to see some of that intersectionality as well. I think it just would be really, really helpful info. So if you're willing and if you have time, I would love to see that.
The way that we asked the age question was 18 to 29, 30 to 39, 40 to 49. We asked with decades. So I can give you 18 to 29, but I cannot give you 18 to 24. Is that 18 to 29 decade useful to you?
It will be useful, yes. Yeah, we do find that older set within that generation tends to respond differently and have very different experiences, but it'll still be helpful info that I'll be happy to pass along to our partners as well. Yeah, thank you.
Sure, and it may be a note for us for next year, assuming we get to do it next year, we'd love to ask that question differently so we can actually compare 18 to 24, 25 to 29 to each other. yeah, I'm happy to follow up on that.
All right, Angela here. Again, I don't think I can say anything that hasn't been said yet. Just, thank you. This is very useful for us as a commission, as a city. So thank you for all your hard work. Thank you, Linnell, as well. I think I do have a question for Mike. Mike, do you know if this is, we're taking this to the city council? If this is being sent to them?
I don't know what Gretchen may have already done or plans to do like as of tomorrow, but we will take the survey results that we got and discuss it in awareness task force a little bit later this month, and talk about how we want to share the results more broadly. Last year, the Salem Reporter had interest in our survey and did an article, and I would expect that that same reporter who still is there would be interested in the follow-up, especially with all this rich information that we got on the unsheltered population. So we'll talk a little bit about distribution at Awareness Task Force, but I don't know of of Gretchen's specific plans to share with mayor and city council, but I expect that that's on the agenda as well.
All right, thank you, Mike. Yeah, I think it's important for them to also have this information as we work towards finding solutions. Okay, any more questions? Okay, hearing none, again, thank you to the students, the class, Linnell. Thank you, and we look forward to continuing this work with you guys.
And I'll just chime in before we sign off to let you know how much we appreciate as a class the opportunity to do real work that matters. I think it's a great learning experience, and I think it's so much more motivating for students to do something that actually can serve our city instead of just some random case study that some professor wrote up that you can spend hours and hours figuring out how to write a questionnaire and analyzing data, and then it doesn't do anything. But we appreciate Mike and Gretchen and Tricarico came to class, and the Linnell came to class, and the help that you've given us and the opportunity that you've given us. We really appreciate it. I feel like it's a great opportunity to learn. It's a great opportunity to learn in a setting where we can make a difference. And we appreciate you and the opportunity you've given us to present and be here tonight. So thank you. And thank you for what you're doing for our city. So we know you've got a full agenda.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right.
I'm going to sign off as well. And Mike, if there are any other follow-ups or things I can help with, feel free to reach out.
Thank you so much. Have a great night.
All right. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
This is Linnell. I have a question. Is it okay for me to stay on for a little while just as a listener?
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, I think we can move. It feels weird to say we can move on because I mean, the work's not going to stop, but we can move on to the next agenda item for now. Bias crime update, Lieutenant Aguilar.
So I will warn you, I'm having connectivity issues. So if I freeze, I'll turn my video back off, but hopefully I'll make it through. So I had one bias crime reported since the previous meeting, and it happened on May 16th. It happened in Northeast Salem, and it involved the sign of a person advertising their business was damaged with hate language and hate symbols on both sides of the sign. It was actually reported to us via social media. We were able to reach out to the victim, gather evidence, and start an investigation. So there is no suspect at this point, but it is has been documented, and we're hoping that potential evidence can be gathered from the sign. So that's still an open investigation. That was the only bias crime we had. We had 8 different bias incidents that were reported since the last meeting. The first one was on May 11th, which happened in crisis, who was menacing pedestrians with a hatchet and was making some racist comments as saying the officers ended up taking the person into custody, and really was able to determine that more likely than not, it wasn't necessarily a bias crime, but they did document it as a bias incident. In May 13th, we received information from a customer that they were in a store in Northeast Salem, and they purchased an item and were contacted several times by store employees, both inside the store and outside the store, and were asked about the item they purchased. The item tag hadn't been removed, so an alarm was set off when they left the store, and they were contacted multiple times by employees even after they showed a receipt, and they really felt that those contacts were because of their race. So the officer did take a bias incident report, and the customer said we're going to be working with the store management on that issue and concern. On May 14th, we responded to a location in Southeast Salem of an individual who was heavily intoxicated at a get-together and was making anti-LGBT comments, creating a disturbance. And there were several people who were very disturbed by the language that was using. The person ultimately left the party, and a bias incident report was taken. There was no arrests made. On May 17th in Northeast Salem, there was a road rage incident. Really involved a driver who was making a lot of negative comments to another driver's national origin as they were driving, with comments. And after the comments were made, the other individual drove off. So no crime, but it was documented. On May 30th, in Southeast Salem, there was a person who suffering maybe from mental health crisis, was outside a store and was making comments to a store employee that were anti-Black. There wasn't a crime and no arrest was made, but we were called and we took a bias incident report on that. Also on the same day, on May 30th in Northeast Salem, a neighbor contacted us, said that a different neighbor was making comments and yelling at this victim neighbor, and the victim neighbor felt that this interaction, this negative interaction, was because the other neighbor didn't agree with the victim neighbor's same-sex relationship. And so there wasn't any crime, but we did take a bias incident report on that one. On June 3rd in South Salem, a community member contacted us and reported that while outside of their location, they were contacted by several juveniles who were using profane language, very anti-LGBTQ language towards them, along with their child. And then as well as reported some tension between themselves and a neighbor that seemed to focus more on them than anyone else in the neighborhood. And the belief is it's because of their same-sex relationship. It was documented, that incident was documented, and the community member was given a referral to the Oregon Department of Justice hotline, and then also referred to the Human Rights Commission if they wish to contact the commission. And then on June 5th, and then as well on June 7th, a resident in Northeast Salem reported hearing from inside their house that neighbors were using a lot of anti-Black language, and the resident, what neighbor was making the comments, but felt that the comments were made specifically towards them. And then they also reported that an individual banged on their door, made an anti-Black statement, and then when they opened up the door, the person had already walked away and was leaving in a car. So they called us and reported both of those incidents, and it was documented, and that investigation's ongoing. We don't have any necessarily direct information on this individual or what his intentions were, but the officer worked with this community member to encourage them to call us back if the similar behavior continues, so we can continue the investigation. So that is all I have for what was reported in the last month. I don't know if there are other questions related to that particular piece. I will say that I have drafted a document. Unfortunately, it's a fairly long document, but it is in response to the hard work that the Human Rights Commission put towards the city that involved many of the recommendations and requests from the community members towards, there's 6 specific points that relate to the police department. So I'm working on drafting a response so that we can begin that conversation. So I have it completed. It is 6 pages long, but to be fair, a lot of it is cut and paste. So I would cut what the recommendation was, and then I would put my answer, but it is 6 pages long. So hopefully I'll get that to Gretchen soon so she can provide it to the Human Rights Commission. You can read it, digest it, and then put it on agenda if you have questions or we want to discuss it, as well as if there are questions specific to Chief Womack, we can put it on his calendar to have him visit the meeting again and answer questions. So I know that was a lot, but if there are any questions related to the bias incident report or that, I'm welcome. I'm happy to take the questions. And hopefully all of that made it and I didn't freeze halfway through. Okay, good. Thank you, Kelsey.
Any questions from commissioners?
I would like to say that I am one of the individuals that had a bias incident, and I spoke to the officer about what steps I could take, and she directed me to Human Rights.
I just want to say, oh, this is Kelsey. Amelia, thank you so much for sharing that with us, and thank you for coming to this meeting. Please let us know if you have any feedback that we can communicate.
Yes, I want to know what this commission does because, and I'm sorry if I get emotional, because my wife and I have been experiencing a lot of discrimination. I'm sorry. So we want to know what this commission does, and if I want to know specifically if there's any way I can help the commission, because it's getting to the point where we're thinking about moving.
Amelia, thank you so much for sharing. You know, our role as a commission is really to find out about the stories that are out there that are like yours. And so I just want to applaud you for reaching out to us in addition to making the report to the police, because it is important for us to be able to put a human face to the reports that we hear each month. What we do as a commission involves one, listening to our community and finding out about stories like yours, and then trying to turn those stories and those experiences, which are so painful, into positive change for the community. And some of that looks like very concrete policy and law recommendations that we take up to council. And sometimes that kind of work takes time. But I think an important thing that we try to do as well is just to be very good listeners and to provide support. And many of us have received training through this commission in and core response training in assisting people who are experiencing trauma. And discrimination is a form of trauma, and it's very difficult for people, and it's very difficult in their lives. And so any commission member would be happy to talk with you and just listen and hear your story and see what we can do to help. We can't always help everybody's individual situation, but hopefully by being really good listeners and then taking what we've heard and advising council on action, we can improve things for people. So just thank you so much for being here.
Sorry, thank you. Thank you.
I just want to say thank you for bringing this up. I know it's difficult to do so, and hopefully we can continue. You can continue connecting with the Human Rights Commission so we can find solutions as well. Lori, do we have any complaints / concerns of discrimination?
None that have been reported for this meeting.
Okay, thank you. Task force and project updates. Mike?
I can talk about both awareness and LGBTQIA+. First on awareness, we had a very brief meeting because we were anticipating the survey results to be shared at this meeting. And so we really just met briefly to discuss some of the preliminary information we had about the survey, like the number of respondents and some of the background that Marianne had given us. But we kept our meeting very, very short because we knew that the meat of it would be at this meeting. At our next meeting, we will talk about how to disseminate the results from the survey. We'll also continue to work on communication planning for the rest of the year. That's pretty much it for awareness. Are there any questions on that? And then I could just dive right into LGBTQ after that. So then on LGBTQIA+ intersectional, I don't always pronounce all the letters or say it all the way, but it's very important that we use all of our letters and remind us that it's an intersectional task force. We continue to work on the safe spaces concept. We are getting close to a place on the safe spaces concept where we'll be able to share it with the broader commission. I think we discussed at our last meeting that we maybe need 1 or 2 more meetings to flesh out the ideas. We had a community visitor a couple of meetings ago who made the great suggestion of including the city among the participants in the Safe Spaces program, and having some visibility for the program at public spaces that are owned by the city, including parks. After that idea came to us, Gretchen arranged for the City Parks Department to come visit us at our next meeting so that we can talk a little bit more about that community member's recommendation and hear from the Parks Department directly about their thoughts about that particular recommendation. Our final recommendation to the HRC will include a little bit more built out budget. We're also working on a resource packet that would go to participants in the program. In addition to talking about safe spaces, we also talked about whether we might, as a task force, want to have a few more LGBTQIA+ intersectional events that we recognize. One of our chief things that we do is Trans Day of Remembrance every November. There are many other LGBTQIA+ intersectional events, however, that take place throughout the year. And so we discussed kind of fleshing out our calendar a little bit more and perhaps working on a few other events, maybe not doing always as big a thing as we do for Trans Day of Remembrance, but finding a way to recognize those, especially using our city's communication channels. And then I did want to mention, as part of LGBTQIA+, this didn't come up at our meeting because I didn't know about it, but there are 2 events in June for Pride that are being independently organized by different groups. There is a Kaiser Pride that is taking place, I believe, on June 12th. And there is a Salem Pride rally that is taking place on June 18th. Again, these are being organized by some outside organizations, but there is information about those events kind of circulating on social media. And if anyone is interested in participating in those, I'd be happy to share links and the like. And I should say these 2 Pride events are in addition to, not replacing, our Capitol Pride, which takes place in August.
Thank you, Mike. Any questions? Okay. Thank you again, Mike. Tricarico, equivalences / chapter 97, sorry.
Yeah, Tricarico here. So we haven't met because we're still figuring out our next meeting for the chapter 97 discussion. And my first conversation with Gretchen is that we wanted to kind of look at everything all together and not just chapter 97. So if anyone is interested in joining us in that, please let Gretchen know if you haven't already. And we'll also be inviting the city attorney to kind of advise us on the legal aspects of that. So that'll be our first steps in getting that going and reviewing chapter 97 and then the other kind of city codes that we deal with.
Thank you, Tricarico. Any questions regarding equivalence / chapter 97? Okay. Laurie, any staff updates?
Gretchen had no updates for this either.
Okay, how about the community calendar?
Was that directed at me?
Oh, yeah. Yes.
It looks, based on my notes, I'm going to say there's nothing for discussion, but I don't know if that makes sense to you all. Does she normally say something like that?
I think
let's see.
when we were meeting in person, we had a really robust community calendar of events. And since we've been virtual, we really have not had very many. But as events start up, I might expect that Gretchen would share those hopefully at our next meeting.
I'll make note of that too for her.
Well, yeah, one of the things she had sent out before this meeting was a really short calendar that included the Kaiser Pride Fair for this Saturday, as well as a Juneteenth event on June 19th, but there weren't a lot of details about that. So there were a couple things on it this month.
Yeah, thank you, Kathy. I was going to mention that Gretchen did send out that page with those events. Okay, any member remarks or announcements? This is open to anybody that wants to speak. Anything they want to say?
Commissioner, actually, I noted that, is it Commissioner Reinhold? Board Member Reinhold joined, and so I believe you have a quorum now at 7. If you want to go back and look at the consent calendar and the 3 sets of meeting minutes and kind of go back to that part of the agenda.
Yeah, we can do that actually. Yeah, no, I was counting and I forgot to count myself. So I was like, no, we don't, but yeah, we do. Okay. Approval of agendas and approval of minutes. Can I get a motion to approve those? And it's approving. Oh.
I was just going to say so moved.
Go ahead.
No, you're good. I was going to say, are we just approving last month's? Is that what we're doing?
Gretchen actually said, you guys can decide if you're okay with all of the meeting minutes. You can actually say all together the 3 sets and approve all of them at one time. Or if there were questions that you need to pull from one of those sets, then you would individually approve each set. So.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, if everybody's okay doing that, I need a motion to approve all 3 agendas and minutes.
All right, take 3. So moved.
All right, can you get a second?
I'll second.
All right, all those in favor say aye or thumbs up.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, any opposed? All right, approval of agenda minutes. Thank you. All right, oh, Laura, you're gonna say something?
Apologize for that. Can I see who seconded it again so I can write that down? I can record that.
I think I might have, but I think Krista might have done it at the same time.
Oh.
We'll just go with Kathy. Is that okay? Okay.
All right, once again, okay, finally, member remarks and or announcements. This is open to everybody if they want to say something.
I just wanted to say to the person who came, if you're still listening, who experienced the bias incident, please reach out to us. Please reach out to Gretchen. Obviously, you probably don't want to discuss that harrowing event in detail in a public meeting, but please reach out to us so we can learn how to best support you and making you feel safe in your community again, because that's really important to us.
Okay, thank you. I have reached out to Gretchen. I turned off my camera because I cried too much. Thank you for letting me join this meeting. It was really wonderful to attend, actually. And I would be interested in attending more meetings if that was okay.
Awesome. Well, we would love to have you. And again, feel free to reach out to us individually so we can further support you.
This is Tricargo mentioned. You're always welcome to join our meetings. And Lieutenant Aguilar, you were going to say something, or?
No, she didn't have Gretchen's contact information. I could definitely get it to her, but it sounds like she has it, so I'm good.
Okay, thank you. If nobody else has anything, again, thank you, Everett, for your work. Thank you for attending today's meeting, and I'll see you next month. This meeting is adjourned.
Good night, everybody.
Night, everybody. Thank you, Angelo.
Thank you.